but what he said made a lot of sense because, again, speaking about history, I have this account in my library. One of the things I do for all my patrons, it's patreon.com/The Medicine Show. But one of the things I do for all my patrons, I make my research library available. So all these documents I refer to, they're all in there. But there's the accounts of Bishop Ajayi Crowder. I think that's his name. Ajayi Crowder. He's the one who is famous for creating the primer of the Yoruba language for their Bible and the Igbo language for our Bible. And so one of the things he did was he was trying to figure out because he knew there was a lot of dialects of the Igbo language, and he was trying to figure out what the real Igbo was in his mind, because he knew that somebody speaking it, he felt somebody speaking it correctly and everybody else is speaking a variation of that correct central version. And he identified the Isu group, right, as the central Igbo.
We believe that everyone has a story to share. We believe in the power of storytelling in today's digital economy. Yes, we believe that our audience need to be touched at the level of emotion so we can better engage. What about you? Do you believe in storytelling as much as we do? Do you want to reach the hearts and minds of your audience? Then join us in our online training class, Storytelling for Content Creators and Digital Entrepreneurs. Come to obehi1food.com/storytelling and learn how to leverage your storytelling skills so you can earn more as a content creator and digital entrepreneur. Storytelling is a powerful instrument at our disposal. Let's explore it together. See you in the class.
For many reasons, right? A lot of different Igbo communities say, I come from here, we come from here, but Isu people will say that they came out of the ground, which typically means we've been here so long that there's no point trying to even discuss where we came from, right? They're also right in the middle of the map, and it's the densest part of population-wise. So if there's going to be an origin, it would likely be from that area. And so he said this has to be the central Igbo group. And he also saw that the Isu people could be understood by a lot of the other Igbos, but some of the other Igbos can't understand each other. Again, like that tapestry. If there's a wave, and I'm on the far east of that wave, and you're on the far west, we're gonna have a hard time understanding each other. But we can both understand the person in the middle very well, or better than each other, right? And so, based on all those context clues, he said this is the central group. Well, then he went to Onitsha. And he had wrote a Bible verse in the Isu language, and he spoke it to them, and they started laughing at him, right? That this isn't our language, that this is Igbo. We speak Onitsha, right? And he'd go to another village, and they say, no, that's Onitsha. We speak this. And so they saw their communities as entirely different languages. And it was him, a foreigner, somebody from far away, who has a bird's eye view that can say, you're all speaking the same language. You understand? Back to that frog example, right? To me, a frog, you're all making the same sound. But to each other, they're going to hear these little nuances and things like that. So language, as far as the origin of language, is very interesting, but you see it in the way we interpret ourselves, right? Interpret languages. I always say that if Europe was placed in Africa, they would identify all of the Romance languages as the same, different dialects of the same language, right? I think it's politics and history that gives them the right to say they're different languages. But somebody says "Ola," somebody says "Alo." You know, it's a lot closer than somebody saying "Kilo de," somebody saying "Dewo," that kind of thing. So go ahead.
That's powerful. I interviewed a man yesterday from Congo. Of course, he did make reference to Igbo too, but in this case, what we were discussing was African traditional religion. And his thesis is that all African traditional religions are one. They can actually be unified as one. So that is what he is actually working on, how to unify African traditional belief system, which of course, contrary to how the West understands Christianity, this guy is actually powerful. Really very interesting conversation. I think we spent like 2 hours in the conversation, and it's really deep, no? Looking at what is God, the concept of God and everything about it, going back to ancient Kemet, and it's really an interesting conversation.
That was a good one, yeah.
Now, of course, we didn't finish, so we are going to go back again. We already booked another appointment. Now, the point, what I'm trying to say here is that when we stay at the ordinary level, we just believe that we know everything. We don't know everything here. We need to keep on digging up the story. You did say something like at a point people say they came out from the ground, no? You know that among the Yoruba people, they believe that Oduduwa came from the sky, no? Okay, now if you go to the Benin, some of the founders of the Benin people, they refer to the king as Ojiso. Now, what is Ojiso?
Yeah.
Ojiso means king of the sky. Okay, so, the question now is that, is it really, because, there is a difference between knowledge and folklore. Some of the things that they don't really make sense as it were, no? But we just believe them. But not all of us are going to believe them because we are going to, okay, now, what the guy was saying yesterday, what the professor was saying yesterday is that African traditional belief system is a pure science.
Yes.
Compared to Christianity.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we must understand this as a science.
Yes.
So there are things that we might say, okay, yeah, this is, people came from the ground, but there are times that we are going to have to really evaluate them. We need to evaluate some of these things and really say, okay, this exactly is what this means. And we can prove it, we can show it. I think this is the work of the African people. We need to dig out our history, like I always say here, all the time. Nobody is coming to do this work for us. It is us that will do it. Now, who was speaking Igbo language, say, because you did mention the fact that this language had probably been existing for about 6,000 years or so, thereabout. More than that, okay? How do we know who were speaking these languages? Were they within the territory of Igbo extraction in Nigeria, today, present-day Nigeria? Or were they also speaking this language in some other part, and then they came, and were there interaction? How do we find some evidence of this language in this continuous evolution?
For sure. Yeah, again, that is difficult. That is difficult, especially without our contemporary form of writing. Our ancestors did have forms of writing, but they were almost independent of spoken language, right? They're almost completely independent. So that, for example, if we use like Insipidi or Uli, which I'm coming to see are more or less the same, right? Uli refers to the die, and Insipidi refers to a specific code system within the writing system. If we look at those written language systems, people across different cultures wrote with them. Right? It said that Insipidi itself doesn't originally come from the Igbo culture, but an Efik person, an Igbo person, an Ibibio person. And funny enough, people in Congo, I'm coming to learn, will all write in the same way and communicate with each other using that thing. So we don't have, as far as history goes, we don't have the advantage of written language in the way we see it in the West, right? It's hard to say what, and that being said, it's very difficult to say who was speaking what language where, right? It is very difficult to say that. But our region, I mean, the lower Niger region, has an unusually, for any place in the world, high population density. It's there's a lot of people concentrated in that very relatively small space. It's very dense. I think that even if you look at the transatlantic slave trade, that region was used to populate a couple of continents and islands, right? And the way the population is going back again, it's going to be one of those places where you look at the Indus Valley, China in general, that kind of, it's going to be like that type of place where it's like one of those major world population centers. I think it has always been that. It has always been, Nile Valley is another one. It has always been a major population center. So when we talk about language, I think there's too many people speaking that language in one place without any evidence of them being forced to speak it for us to speak about, how do I put it? Like for us to assume something else was being spoken, for us to assume something else was being spoken in this place. I think, of course, the nature of words change. And I think that there was a language that nearly, not all of them, but nearly every language in that region was speaking that was mutually intelligible until fairly recent history, right? I think there was a common language that we were speaking